When it comes to wealth accumulation, compound interest emerges as the master weaver, transforming simple threads into a rich financial tapestry. This power is harnessed through various investment vehicles, from the potential growth and appreciation of stocks to the interest earned from bonds or money market funds. Imagine stocks as seeds in a fertile field, growing through dividends and capital gains, nurtured by compound growth. Over time, these seeds bloom into a forest of wealth. Meanwhile, retirement accounts like IRAs and 401ks serve as robust containers that offer tax-deferred growth, steadily filling with the waters of compound interest, preparing you for a secure and prosperous future. As we traverse the landscape of financial growth, remember, whether it's a stock or bond, retirement account or taxable account, the goal is to leverage the powerful force of compound interest to guide us towards our ultimate destination, financial freedom and security. Let's embark on this journey with wisdom and foresight, harnessing the power of compound interest to pave our road to wealth accumulation. All right, so let's talk about investments, and let's go to Michael so that we can get the most out of him before he has to leave. How should we think about asset classes and diversification in order to take advantage of compound growth?
So there's a line I like to say, which is that you're not diversified unless you have a portion of your portfolio that you hate. Because what are you going to hate? The part of your portfolio that's not working, which is the very definition of diversification and non-correlated behavior. Look, nobody knows what tomorrow brings, right? What are you ultimately diversifying? You're diversifying different paths, different scenarios with which things could play out. So ideally, you want to have as much exposure to as many different future paths, and if you could, probability-wise, weight it appropriately, which is basically kind of a risk parity kind of concept at its core. Sort of the idea of having stocks, treasuries, commodities, no matter what cycle you're in, one of them is likely to do well. I was at a conference maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, a while ago. I forget the guy who said it, but this person that was on the panel said something along the lines of, diversification is a luxury for the rich. And the implication there is, the way you get very wealthy is you take a concentrated bet on something, whether it's yourself, your business, an individual stock. Fastest way to make a lot of money, also the fastest way to go broke, right? So I do think that if you're going to think about investing and diversification, diversify your actual investments, but concentrate on your own skill set, concentrate on your own personal investment outside of putting your money to work, put yourself to work and enhance your skills, compound your own ability to be effective and efficient. Because I think that probably is where most people will end up having that luxury. And I will say that the point about time is important when it comes to investing. This isn't really talked about a lot, but I do believe we're entering an age where people are going to be able to live a lot longer, whether it's the weight loss drugs like Ozempic or technology that makes us able to just have longer lives. It really is important for people to consider the idea that their retirement age may have to be longer because they're going to live longer and be able to work more anyway. So if you want to get returns, you got to diversify. If you're going to diversify, you got to have investments that you hate. But if you're going to get wealthy, concentrate on yourself.
Thank you for that. I saw the figure that 150 million Americans own stocks, but an estimated 42% of US adults do not. This is a really complex issue. Helen, how do you think that we can actually help more people to move the needle?
Well, a lot of this is about, poverty and not having money. This isn't about people who are refusing to buy, stocks for some reason. I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but there aren't very many of them. And one of the ways to do this is, in other countries, such as Australia, for instance, workplace retirement contributions by both employer and employee are mandatory. Right? They just have a policy on this. And we don't have that here. In fact, you don't have to, if you're an employer, you don't have to offer up a 401k or an IRA of any sort to your employees. And the employee in turn does not have to contribute. This obviously is something that probably needs to be addressed. And there have been various attempts to do it, most of which have not gone very well, though there are now initiatives in some of the states where people who don't have workplace retirement plans are offered one through the state. But that's where a lot of the problem is coming in. If you look at the stats, and I'm sorry if I know you were going to ask this question, I would have looked up the exact number before the conference, before this call. That's where the majority of people who don't have stocks are actually coming in at this point. Are these people usually low income who just simply don't have access to a plan at work? The second group to some extent is the lower income self-employed. And it's a similar dynamic in that if you don't have, the second you have to take the step to set up your own retirement account, a certain percentage of people just aren't going to do it. And those are really the areas that you would need to concentrate on to bring this number much higher, in my view.
Doc G, as somebody who has been able to achieve early retirement financial freedom, how do you manage your stocks versus bonds?
Well, again, for me, first and foremost, as Helen was talking about this, it helps me reflect on the fact that I come from a place of very enormous privilege, right? Two professional parents who invested when I was a kid, who invested in their own businesses, as well as real estate, as well as stocks and bonds, which has given me the ability to go to school, get a good education, have a high-paying job as a doctor, and save money. Being that I am at what I would call the tail end of my doctor career, because I've slowed down doing that, but I am still making money, and my wife at the moment still works, although that may not be forever. It's easy for me to be a little bit more aggressive with my money. So you're talking about asset allocation and knowing that we still have some human capital, we're still making some money, and that helps defray some of our spending. It's easy for me to be a little more aggressive in the sense that I can do more equity investing and less bond investing. In the past, I've done real estate investing. I'm not as big on that right now, but I'm able to be a little bit more aggressive with my equities. Now, again, that might be a little bit different than Michael was talking about. I'm a big fan of broad-based index investing. But given the fact that I still have income, it gives me a little bit more space to wait until I protect myself or risk mitigate more with things like bonds and treasuries, et cetera.
Yeah, and it goes to the point that Michael was talking about earlier, that if indeed we are going to be living longer, that I think that we may have to take more risk. We may need more stocks for longer, and we need potential appreciation, not just relying on the interest of bonds, for example.
It's interesting because we take that information, right? But we also compare it to the fact that just by having a portfolio and just by owning stock actually decreases your likelihood of running out of money quite a bit. So on my podcast, I often interview financial advisors, coaches, et cetera, who deal with people who are getting close to retirement. And it's not the people who have a portfolio that are really at high risk of running out. It's the people who don't have a portfolio. The people who have a portfolio, the people who understand and have been putting their money in their 401k, et cetera, the likelihood they're going to be okay is much, much higher. These people actually rarely run out of money. Where we have problem is the people who didn't save in the first place or were at a job that didn't save for them. As Helen was talking about, there's a lot of legislative change that could help with that. But those are the people I think who are really struggling. So when we look at these longer time periods, I don't worry about the people who are seeing their financial advisor and have a portfolio and they're worried, they're arguing about, can I withdraw 4% or 3% or 5%? Those are the people I'm not worried about. It's really the people who don't know what those terms mean and have never been really exposed to long-term investing, because we do need a little bit of an aggressive return if we want to even consider this idea of retiring at a reasonable age and then living quite a bit of a post-retirement life.
I would also add that I think sometimes people do have the means with which to save for retirement, but are so risk averse that they make bad choices very early on, and they're compounding their bad choices. So one of the things I kind of do for fun is this sort of is I go to these sort of free retirement planning dinners, and I ask a lot of uncomfortable questions because they're usually just sales pitches for annuities, right? And you have people who are like, oh my, right? Everyone loves the guaranteed income. Anyway, but my point is, there was somebody who was a state employee for, I don't know, 20 something years. And she said that, she only made 1.75% or something.
Geez.
And I'm like, I'm pretty sure the state of North Carolina's public retirement system is, if it were that bad, it would be legendary. I would have heard it was that, right? It cannot, so either the number is wrong, or if you select an option, I never want to lose money, you're going to end up with a very low rate of return over 20 years. Right. So that just broke my heart, because you had somebody, who was having money put aside, and who harnessed the power of time, but either didn't get any advice early on or didn't get the right kind of advice, and she's kind of blaming the system. And I'm like, I don't know about that, and I'm not sure an annuity would solve your problem either, sister. You know what I mean? But and then that just made me go, all right, this is what is sort of part of, Doc, I know your next book is about purpose in life. This is kind of like my purpose. And I was like, let me talk to you. Let's this is not complicated. This is not rocket science. We don't have to make it perfect. We don't have to make it complicated, right? But you got to be able to stomach some risk, because the riskiest thing you can do is to choose to have no risk, particularly when you have multi-decades ahead of you. That is right? So that's the other thing I would add, is that, and I've had this where I had somebody else who came in and they had a target date fund, it was like a good target date fund, but the target date fund was 10 years too early, and I was like, why? Let's change that puppy up, that kind of thing. So I think there are a lot of things that have made investing easier, being able to buy fractional shares, except they're on platforms that kind of promote investing as gambling instead of, hey, you can buy fractional shares, you can compound $5 at a time. I mean, that's so powerful, but not if you're buying, meme stocks, right? Not if you're doing that. So it's part of it is so many societal structures are getting us to spend, to consume. So many of us are getting us to manipulating us into speculating, not investing, trying to beat the system, because this, and then our own psychology. Right? So we have a lot of headwinds, and really, but I keep coming across stories. So this will be good for segment 3, stories of regular people coming out of a few decades as multimillionaires.
Mariko, in terms of retirement account that's tax deferred, or a Roth IRA where you pay the tax up front and it can grow tax free, versus a taxable account, how does one think about the prospect of compound growth when it's should it go into a taxable account or a tax advantaged account?
So the problem or the issue that can happen, and with people who are super savers, is they're going to be paying down their mortgage, even if the rate is very low, or they're going to be putting, they'll be maxing out everything in tax deferred accounts, which is great to max out everything but then they end up prepaying things rather than having an investment fund, or, the sort of rainy day fund or an investment fund. And I think it's important to have balance on everything, because if you're putting money in an illiquid asset, your rate of return, if you can, again, it's different. When your mortgage is 7%, it's pretty hard to, get a higher after-tax return than that. But, there are ways to think about the ecosystem of your money. And I think that's important. So the good thing about tax deferred accounts is mentally, that's mattress money you're not going to touch. So it's easier to be aggressive if you don't check the balances all the time and make yourself nuts, right? So that's good. The thing that we come across though is, so if you want to think of the term of asset location, where you want to put things that are taxed higher, say income as opposed to gains, in tax deferred accounts, it's a thing that people have a hard time getting their heads around, right? So then you end up with, you know what, something is better, doing something is better than being perfect. Never mind, just, forget asset location, but put the money away, So it's there are, it's just, me, Andy, I'm sorry, there's never like a short, simple answer. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it can be very nuanced, and the nuances are where the fun is, I think.
Helene, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to add two things, which is first, unless you're a professional like Mariko, or you do this, you write about money professionally like me, try to avoid all these dinners that you get in your mail, in your inbox. Please. These people always sound amazing. I'm like Mariko. I like going. I so like going. I will sometimes go if my husband has gotten the invite, and I will go. My husband will not go to these things. And they all sound really persuasive. Like, I have been in rooms where I swear I have heard REITs where you can't get your money out for like a decade, thinking, should I sign up for this? And I'm like, no. So, really, don't go to these things. I've seriously run into so many people who've signed up for stuff that they've so regretted. And the second is what Mariko sort of said is, the number of people I've interviewed over the years who have, just let money sit around for years and years and years because they were afraid of making a mistake, is countless. At a certain point, you would be better off with the REIT where the money is locked up for 10 years. Probably not very often, but occasionally, because there really are people who will just leave their money in savings accounts and not on substantial sums of it, for years and decades. Sometimes it always seems, I think one of the things when you deal with money professionally, or you're just very interested in it, is you take it kind of for granted that you have this knowledge and you have this ability to do X, Y, and Z. And in fact, it's not actually that common. And people really do stuff that is not well advised for reasons that seem actually fairly smart and good to them. I'm just being cautious. I don't want to lose my money. And I bet anything, by the way, the person who had the investment with less than 2% return had been talked into it by somebody, because school teachers in particular, they tend to be very targeted by some of these really dubious so-called financial advisors. I use the phrase there at this point. And I think it's something we all have to really remember, that people do these things because they do think they're being good. Like, I'm just checking over and over again. And I would say one third thing, and I'm sorry, I'm going on, and I'm sorry, is that you also need to be careful of somebody who comes to you. One of the things I find is people come to me over and over again and ask if there's like some quote safe investment, that could definitely keep up with the stock market. And I've had to explain over and over again that actually doesn't exist. And the really crazy part of this is if you actually have a public facing life like I do, is you'll find that it's the same people over and over again who come to you. So like 5 years later, I'll hear from the same person. Like, do you have a, suggestion for this? And it's like, but I told you a couple of years ago that this didn't exist. And here's the actual email I wrote to you, at the time. And I think that that's just something we have to all kind of wrap our heads around, and think of try to think of better ways to explain this to people.
And harness the wishful thinking
right
into effective action.
Right. Like, this is what you can do. What I often say is, this is what we know works best, right? We know that putting money in the stock market through broad-based index funds will probably leave you in good shape, right? And that's kind of been the approach I've taken with people over the years.
Yeah, it really begs the question of, a big percentage of the population just needs a good financial advisor.
Right.
I hate to say it because we know that some of these things are not particularly hard, Like, it's not really hard when you're 20 years old and you have a little bit of money. It's not hard to figure out what to put that money into if you want to do a little bit of studying. But between the disinterest in doing the studying and the emotionality of the decisions which don't necessarily serve people, it's very clear to me now that a lot of people just need a financial advisor. The problem is finding one that's actually going to help you, right? As opposed to finding one who has ulterior motives.
Exactly. Right. That's a really important thing. The understanding the ecosystem, what the incentives are, like why. I mean, that's how to develop the discernment too.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's so many times I'm kind of ashamed of my industry because there's so many bad actors out there who rationalize all sorts of crazy things and don't think of themselves that way. They're not walking around going, hoo, I'm like Machiavelli over here. I know how to do psyops and remove people from their money, and yet, they do. And yeah, it's,
Well,
yeah.
I think
that's the
Mariko and I
opportunity.
are the same person here. I always say, I'm sure Bernie Madoff didn't go to bed thinking he was a bad person, but he was. I feel the exact same way. And I want to add that, one thing the federal government did under the Trump administration, which made it harder, is they kind of mucked up the use of the word fiduciary so that it's even hard now. We used to be able to tell people, get to somebody who works under the fiduciary standard. And now even that is a hard thing to tell people because the term has been so loosened. I don't want to say it's meaningless, but it definitively does not necessarily get you what you think it's going to get you anymore.
And also these sort of credential mills that aren't real. You're awarded a credential from a for-profit educational institution, and you're like, you get like a bunch of chances, and it's like, I don't know, 10 video modules, but you get to put some initials after your name, and I mean, not to be an elitist snob here, but I mean, damn it, certain credentials mean something. And same with the fiduciary. Like there are people who'd be a certified fiduciary, and I go and I Google these up. I look these up. What does that mean? Oh, there's this nonprofit, this organization that just got created to then you take a class and you'll be certified that you're going to behave. And I'm like, but there's no public record. Who's on the board? Like what? I mean, you just. It's insane.
As long as you pay your membership, you can say.
Yeah, and the world of, I mean, I hate to also say this because I'm part of this industry, but also the world of podcasts and blogs is no better, right? You've got a bunch of people who have zero credentials and who are speaking usually about very specified situations that don't necessarily fit the whole audience. And there's no accountability, right? So you can pretty much say whatever you want. Vis-a-vis Dave Ramsey saying a safe withdrawal rate of 8% is appropriate. You can say whatever you want on these platforms, and
to a lot of people,
we're not held to any standards on it.
Well, just for the record, I am a fiduciary. I'm not duly registered. I never get a commission, and I think that Mariko is in the same boat. With that, let's go to segment 3.